You wouldn't happen to know when you're supposed to go off, would you?
A student film shot over several years that became first an unsuccessful theatrical release and later an influential cult hit. Now, by cult, I mean it has a small devoted fan base. It's not a group of weirdos taking a sip of poison at the appointed hour in honor of the space god Ganbanadax. Man, what a day to call in sick because you're at the midnight launch of Halo 2.
Sounds good. Let's vaporize it.
Ganbanadax be praised, it's Dark Star.
Fine. Think about this then.
Dark Star was a 1974 science fiction film that's a very dark comedy about a group of slackers on a deep space mission. As a finished product, it clearly had a very low budget, but it has a gritty charm of its own, like finding a candy bar on a gravel path.
What's Talby's first name? My first name.
While the movie was not a financially successful film when it was released, Dark Star has picked up a small and loyal army of fans over a period of decades. It was also the first feature film directed by John Carpenter, so if you have issues with Memoirs of an Invisible Man, blame it on Dark Star.
Who cares? Don't bother me.
Dark Star wasn't a movie about the flagship of the fleet staffed by the best and brightest, but here it's the dullest and dimmest. It's about a crew who don't know or care what they are doing, where the film was framed as truckers in space. At the time, the gold standard for a space film that wasn't about an alien invasion was 2001: A Space Odyssey, a film both admired and mocked by the makers of Dark Star. Whereas 2001 was long and ponderous, Dark Star was short and meandering, sagging in the middle like a tightrope walker who's forgotten that they were wearing ankle weights. But here at least there's a damn good reason for all of that.
These men do not want a happy ship.
Dark Star's production is possibly even more of an interesting story than the one told by the movie, as it started out as a student film made by John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon. It was eventually expanded into a feature where it had a total budget of $60,000, which was small potatoes even then. I mean, that metaphor might be unfair to potatoes of lesser mass and volume, but let's be honest, peeling petite potatoes is a proverbial pain in the neck, which is another metaphor that might be unfair to poorly fitting bow ties, but anyway. It was a film made with more drive and enthusiasm than cash, where its co-writer would describe it as starting off as the most impressive looking student film, but turned into the world's least impressive professional movie. However, looking at it now, it is actually both.
Good luck.
The scout ship Dark Star is in deep space where their mission is to find unstable worlds and blow them up. After a faulty chair had killed the mission's commander, the ship is now headed by Lieutenant Doolittle, who doesn't seem to care too much. He just wants to blow up stuff and pines for his days surfing. There's Boiler, who just spends his downtime blowing off steam. And then there's the tightly wound bore, Sergeant Pinback, who, as it turns out, is actually fuel maintenance engineer Bill Frug, who accidentally took the place of the real but also really dead Pinback.
They are deeply sick and try to compensate by making me feel miserable.
There's also Talby, who prefers to sit alone in the ship's observation capsule. The story for Dark Star is simple. A bunch of barely qualified, as if they were qualified at all, astronauts man a ship that is falling apart and in dire need of repairs, but the crew are not motivated enough to do anything about it.
Storage Area 9 self-destructed last week and destroyed the ship's entire supply of toilet paper.
There are interludes of the crew relaxing in their off hours and an extended sequence of Pinback dealing with a surly pet alien. His rescue alien beach ball turns out to really hate Pinback. But we should remember, a beach ball is for life, not just Christmas. Also, beach ball based pets are not recommended for families who also have a pet hedgehog. Throughout the film, Bomb 20 keeps malfunctioning, where it thinks it's been armed, and on its third false alarm, nothing can be done to deter it from detonating while still attached to the ship.
You are not to detonate. Repeat, you are not to detonate in the bomb bay. Disarm yourself.
The crew are unable to resolve the situation in the usual way, so Doolittle consults the frozen corpse of their leader, Commander Powell, but he's unable to render much assistance unless you need somewhere to keep your beer cool. Doolittle attempts to talk down the sentient bomb from exploding.
How do you know you exist?
While Talby is accidentally shot out into space, Pinback's attempts to defuse the bomb,
Prepare to receive new orders.
well, they don't go so well.
Let there be light.
The ship's destroyed, Talby is captured by an asteroid cluster, while Doolittle takes the opportunity to go surfing one last time. You could sacrifice a comically large Toblerone in honor of Ganbanadax, or spend the evening watching Dark Star. Decades later, it's still a mostly funny and absurdist film that's played very naturalistic by the non-professional cast, apart from Dan O'Bannon often going a little over the top as Pinback. The jokes can be hit and miss, and the extended scene of Pinback chasing the alien does test the viewer's patience. Not everything here lands as intended, but then neither did Glenn Miller. Doolittle is detached for much of the film, but comes alive when he tries to talk the bomb out of exploding with a philosophical discussion about the logic of the situation.
Why don't you have more time?
Because I must detonate in 75 seconds.
Boiler's just there to frustrate Pinback and do the infamous trick with the knife, though the scene where the actor stabbed himself was not deliberate. By the end though, it's all a bit of a downer for most viewers, though for a nihilist, it was Tuesday. The story of Dark Star begins with two students at the University of Southern California's film school, where they had to make a 16mm film that was meant to have a runtime of around 20 minutes. John Carpenter would co-write the script, compose the music, produce and direct, while Dan O'Bannon would co-write, supervise the effects, edit and also co-star as Pinback. I once tried co-writing and editing and co-starring in a movie, but ironically enough, when I complained about the script, my scenes wound up on the cutting room floor. I sure showed me who's boss.
The planet just exploded, sir.
The initial budget was $1,000 when the pair began filming in late 1970, which continued throughout 1971 and into 1972. Shooting was rather piecemeal, so much so that, for example, actor Brian Norell's availability meant that he never actually met Dre Package playing Talby, even in scenes where they are talking to each other. John Carpenter would later overdub the voices of Talby and the frozen commander Powell.
Last week was my birthday. Nobody even said happy birthday to me.
By the time the student project was completed, it had a running time of around 45 minutes, which was considered too long by USC's film school for screenings with other student films. In effect, Dark Star might never be seen by anybody. USC claimed ownership of film products produced by its students that used its facilities and film stock, but if Carpenter could extend it to around 90 minutes, he might be able to find a theatrical distributor. As for USC's ownership of the film, Carpenter and O'Bannon just took the reels when nobody was looking and set to work on creating new scenes to extend the film.
Intuition is no proof. What concrete evidence do you have that you exist?
They had received some financing to shoot new footage, where the new scenes included Doolittle's homemade keyboard instrument, Pinback and Boiler relaxing, and the extended sequence of Pinback hunting the alien and the incident in the lift shaft. Some of the actors wore wigs in the reshoots to match footage from several years earlier.
My jetpack's busted. Oh, man.
Dark Star was a film shot on a tiny budget, but one where they needed to make everything from scratch. Yes, the alien was a beach ball with some claws from a costume and played by Nick Castle, who would later play other suited characters in Carpenter films and himself would later direct films like The Last Starfighter. The entire sequence of the elevator shaft was shot with a horizontal set with the camera turned upside down, while the elevator was on a camera dolly. The spacesuits and sets were made from anything they could find lying around in a discount store, such as muffin tins or ice trays. Carpenter would provide the score, crafted on early synthesizers, and there's a country song, Benson, Arizona, written specifically for the film, and it's a tune that fits so perfectly with the early 70s vibe, being slightly out of it, beards and long hair. When the film was going to be shown theatrically, the 16mm footage was rephotographed on 35mm film, with each shot being reframed for widescreen exhibition. Carpenter and O'Bannon had found a distributor in Jack Harris, though the pair would grit their teeth when working with him. Harris had insisted on a number of changes, including shooting new scenes to replace existing scenes that had dragged on, as well as cutting anything that would jeopardize a G rating. This extended to altering some dialogue and blurring out some of the nudie pics in the crew's quarters. Ron Cobb had designed the ship, but in the era before motion control, most of the ship exteriors were a model that was photographed with a still camera, and those static shots were often filmed as animation. For a film that's both inspired by and meant to be the antithesis of 2001: A Space Odyssey, O'Bannon used a lot of the same techniques. He of course didn't have Stanley Kubrick's clout, and so the film's effects are impressive, but with the caveat of, for the money. They can often come off as a bit cartoony, but this was an era where special effects set in space were A, pretty rare, B, pretty cheap, C, pretty cruddy, and D, pretty much all of the above.
Good work, man.
Much of the time, Dark Star's design and sets punch above its weight, especially if you aren't bothered by flexing sets or wondering if they use the same muffin tins that you have in your own kitchen. The new version of Dark Star premiered at the 1974 FilmX Festival in Los Angeles, with theatrical release coming a year later. It did not do very well at all.
You can't explode in the bomb bay, because it's foolish. You'll kill us all.
Rather than acting as a calling card for getting Carpenter and O'Bannon into the movie business, it in effect stalled their careers for a time. O'Bannon and Carpenter had planned to make more movies together, but the creative urge for each of them to control their work meant they would go their separate ways professionally. Carpenter would eventually make a sale for his script, The Eyes of Laura Mars, and would soon find a directing gig for Assault on Precinct 13. O'Bannon would also find getting further work difficult for a while. He'd been hired to work on effects for the infamous proposed movie adaptation of Dune in the mid-70s, but when that collapsed, O'Bannon found himself in what bank managers like to call a bit of a pickle. As he'd animated computer readouts for Dark Star, George Lucas offered him work animating some computer screens for the first Star Wars film. O'Bannon also worked on a script with Ronald Shusett on a project that would eventually reach the screen as Total Recall. But at the time, like a dinosaur's sex tape, it was seen as unfilmable.
Now it's time to go sleepy by, you worthless piece of garbage.
When analysing Dark Star's audience reactions, Dan O'Bannon was frustrated by the fact that they weren't laughing during some of the comedy scenes. So he decided that if he couldn't make them laugh, he would try scaring them instead. He would apply this maxim when he sold a script called Alien, another film about workers on a ship with an alien creature loose on board, and it is not hard to see elements of Dark Star in Alien. Despite not being aimed at a young audience, Dark Star has a G rating.
What happened? Yeah, the skipper always was lucky.
I would speculate the ending is quite traumatizing for younger viewers. My source of this supposition, my own childhood, where Dark Star was deemed fine enough for showing on television in the afternoons during school holidays in the late 70s and early 80s. That downbeat ending soured me at a time when I was all about the triumphant endings. Later on, I appreciated the goofball aspect, where, truth be told, it's the crew's own laziness that dooms them.
All we'd have to do is patch up the hole in the ship and pump some air back in.
Shut up, Pinback.
Oh, have it your own way.
The last time I watched Dark Star would have been sometime in the 90s, and it was almost unwatchable due to the lousy prints that were in circulation on home video at the time. But having seen it more recently from a clean print in high definition, the picture quality is quite clean now. I'm impressed. There is only so much detail in 16mm film, but it does tend to hide the film's flaws rather than accentuate them. John Carpenter, for his part, had disliked a lot of the material added to extend the film's runtime for theatrical release, and later on he produced a director's cut which actually reduced the runtime to just over 70 minutes, which means you could watch both cuts of Dark Star in roughly the same time it would take you to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. Though if you were in the right state of mind, you could watch 2001 at double speed on one television and Dark Star on another set at normal speed. Well, I suppose that's one way to go cross-eyed, and I honestly have no idea why you would even do that. I don't know, insurance fraud? Over the decades, Dark Star did find an audience who were into its mix of humorous slackers in a space setting, and other filmmakers would cover similar ground following characters on the lower rungs of space fleets. The short-lived American series Quark and the very long-running British comedy Red Dwarf are the most obvious, but there are others in a similar space. Dark Star ends up as one of the 1970s most unique science fiction movies. There's pretty much nothing else like it. But the next time you send somebody off to blow up an unstable planet, I really would suggest that you check the crew's resumes ahead of launch.
Damn it!
If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
He told us this 4 years ago, didn't he?
No, I think it was 4 years ago.